The mark you leave isn't built in a single moment. It's built in all of the small ones. Hello, my friend, and welcome back to Redefining Midlife. I'm your host, Jo Clark, and it's so great to have you here with me today. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to say a huge thank you for the response to last week's conversation with Professor Linda Worrell Carter on women's heart health. Now, the feedback has been amazing, and it's a reminder of why this kind of conversation matters so much. And if you haven't listened to that one yet, please do go back and give it a listen after this episode. The information that you'll be hearing comes from one of the world's best experts on women's heart health. And you are getting her expertise completely free of charge. And as I said last week, it's a conversation that could genuinely save your life or the lives of women you know and love. Okay, now on to today's episode. It's one that I've been wanting to record for a while, and I want to start by asking you a question that you may not have ever thought of before. And it's a biggie. And the question is, what mark do you want to leave on the world? Now, and before you say, oh God, that just sounds a bit grand or a bit serious, stay with me, because I'm not talking about anything grand or huge at all. I'm talking about the small, everyday, deeply personal marks that you are already leaving on the people around you. And that happens whether you realize it or not. And this is one of the most energizing conversations a woman in midlife can have with herself. Because the mark that you leave isn't built at the end of a life. It's being built right now in the choices you're making, the way you're showing up, the person you're becoming. And if this episode speaks to you, just please share it with a woman in your life who you think would also need to hear it and get something from it. Now, you might not know exactly why she needs to hear it right now. Just trust your intuition and send it anyway. Now, when most of us hear phrases like leaving a mark or a legacy, our brains immediately go somewhere big. You think of famous people having done the world something, or so having done something that the world remembers. And because most of us aren't going to have a building named after us, we write that whole idea off as something that just does not apply to us. But that's such a limited way to look at it. The mark you leave isn't about being extraordinary in the eyes of the world. It's about the invisible shape that you leave on the people that your life has touched. And I want to give you an example of what I mean, because I think this is where it gets really real. Think about a woman. Maybe you know someone like this, or maybe you are someone like this. And I've got a hunch that you are. Perhaps you're someone who never held a really big title, never ran a big company, never became famous, never did anything the world would call remarkable. But every single person who came into her orbit felt like, in some way better for it. Her kids grew up knowing that hard things were survivable because they watched her survive them. Her friends called her first when things fell apart. And it wasn't because she always had the answers, but it was because being around her made them feel like they could find their own feet again. And the younger women at her workplace didn't even realize they were watching her, but they were. They were watching the way that she handled herself under pressure, perhaps the way she asked for what she wanted without apology, the way that she never made anyone feel small. That is the mark or the legacy that is left. And that's the stuff that travels through people's lives long after a conversation has ended. And none of it had anything whatsoever to do with achievement or having their name up in lights. And leaving a mark can look and be so varied. A woman who always made people feel seen. A mother who showed her kids what it looks like to keep going when things are hard. A friend who told the truth with kindness, even when it was uncomfortable. Perhaps a woman who chose herself, maybe later than she wanted to, but chose herself anyway. That is what we're talking about today. And I want you to sit with the idea that you are already leaving that kind of mark, whether you know it or not. And the question we're going to explore together is whether the mark you're leaving is the one you actually want to leave. And I want to talk about why midlife is such a perfect time to be asking this type of question, because I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for the particular vantage point that we've got right now at this point in our life. The first half of your life, through all of your experiences, and I'm talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly, well, those experiences has given you data, real, lived, hard-won data. It's things like you know what matters and what doesn't. You know which relationships filled you up and which ones slowly emptied you out. You know what it felt like to ignore your own intuition. And you know what it felt like the times you actually listened to them. That's not nothing. That is everything. And most women in their 20s and their 30s, well, they just don't have that yet. They're still in the thick of collecting that data. Midlife is where it all starts to mean something different. It's where asking what mark you want to leave stops being something you'd like to think about one day, and it starts feeling like something you need to think about now. Maybe, your kids are growing up and you're starting to see which bits of you they've picked up. And boy, that can be confronting, can't it? Because it holds up a mirror in a way that nothing else quite does. Or perhaps your parents are getting older and you're watching up close what a life well lived, or not so well lived, actually looks like. Or perhaps you're in the middle of a career shift, a relationship change, a health scare, a move, a loss, and something has cracked open inside you that's asking even bigger questions that you've ever let yourself ask before. I had one of those moments a few years ago, and I've shared this in detail on previous episodes. So I'm just not going to go into all the nuts and bolts of it here. Go back into past episodes and you'll find it. But there was a period where I stopped and I genuinely asked myself, if this was it, if this were the sum of it all, would I actually be okay with what I'd built? And I'm not talking about the career stuff. I'm not talking about the achievements. It's the human stuff. Had I actually shown up the way I wanted to? Had I been the person I wanted to be? And the honest answer was, well, not always. And that question, sitting with that question, changed a lot for me. And it's part of why I do this work today. And I know from the women I support and meet that so many of you are carrying a version of that same question. So let's explore it together a bit more. I'm going to walk you through 3 smaller questions to think about now, but they aren't surface level ones. They're the sorts of questions I want you to actually sit with, because each of them are going to take you somewhere completely different. But together they're going to give you a really honest picture of the type of mark that you want to leave. The first question is, how do you want people to feel after spending time with you? Not what you want them to say about you, not the words they'd use in a speech or write in a card, but how do you want them to feel? Maybe calmer, braver, more like themselves, seen, like they can do the hard things. Like, I'm thinking about a good friend of mine, and I'm sure that you've got someone like this in your life too. Well, she always makes you feel lighter after you spent time with her. And it's not because she's all, overly cheery or she avoids the hard conversations. Actually, this person is one of the hardest persons to have, or people to have conversations with. But there's something about the way that she listens, the way that she holds space for you without needing to fix you. And that makes you feel like you're going to be okay. You know what? That's not an accident, because it's who she has chosen to be. That is her mark, her legacy. So the feeling is usually where the truth lives, because feelings are harder to perform than words. So, what is a feeling you want to leave in a room when you walk out of it? That's one worth sitting with. Take it for a walk, journal on it later. Let it come back to you when the things are quiet. Now, the second question is, what do you want to have stood for? Now, I'm not talking about a job title or an achievement, but a quality or a value. That thing you kept coming back to even when it was inconvenient, even when it cost you something. Honesty, maybe. Maybe it's courage or warmth or a belief that it's never too late. One of my clients, Sally, well, she'd spent most of her adult life being the person who just kept the peace in her family, at work, in friendships. She was the woman who always smoothed things over, kept everyone comfortable, made sure no one was upset. And she was exhausted. And when we really started to look at what she actually wanted to stand for, the word that kept coming up for her was truth. Sally wanted to be known as someone who was honest, someone whose yes meant yes and whose no meant no. And that shift from peacekeeper to truth teller changed how she showed up in every single area of her life. So, what is the thing that, if someone stripped everything else away, would still be recognisably you? So, spend time with that one. Now, that could come to you straight away with an answer, or maybe it's a kind of question that needs a bit of space before the real answer surfaces. Now, the third question is the one that, in my experience, tends to crack something open the most in women. So, if the women who come after you, your daughters, your nieces, the younger women, the women who are watching you right now, if they only took one thing from your example, what would you want it to be? Not what you tell them and not what you show them, because they're watching. They're always damn well watching. And what you do speaks so much louder than anything you could ever say. And I think about this a lot when it comes to my own life. They're the moments I'm thinking of, when I pushed through fear, when I started something new, when I've chosen myself even when it felt uncomfortable. Those aren't choices I made for me. They're not just made for me. Whether I intended to or not, someone was watching. And now when I think about with this podcast, my Instagram following, my client list growing, that thought is both humbling and genuinely motivating, because it means that every brave choice matters beyond yourself. So I encourage you, just sit with that one. It's a big one. And I also want to bring in something that I don't think gets talked about enough. I think it's just as important as everything we've covered so far. Part of the mark that you leave in the world is deciding what won't be passed down. Every one of us has been handed things that we didn't ask for. Things like patterns of behaviour, beliefs about what women are allowed to want, the idea that being busy is the same as being worthy, the belief that asking for help is a weakness, ways of shrinking ourselves in rooms where we felt we didn't quite belong, or silence that was passed down as politeness. Perhaps it was fear dressed up as caution. The idea that your needs always come last, and that's all packaged up as love. Now, some of these things came from your mother, who got them from her mother, who got them from hers. And no one ever stopped to ask whether they actually wanted to carry them. They just kept all of these stories and beliefs, and they kept them and they passed them along quietly without anyone ever consciously choosing them. One of my biggest aha moments was when I realised that I didn't have to carry on my mother's story because it wasn't mine to carry. And I see this so often with the women that I work with. A woman in her 50s who still can't say no without a page of explanation or an apology. And when we trace it back, she can see exactly where she learned that. A woman who has never once put her own name first on a list of priorities. And it's not because she doesn't matter to herself, but because she was taught very early that she wasn't supposed to. These things run deep for women. They feel like personality traits, but they're not. They're inherited patterns. And the extraordinary thing is, these patterns can stop with you. You can be the woman who stops that. Not by blaming anyone, because all of these women, your mums and their mums, were all doing the best that they could do with what they had. But by making a conscious choice now for yourself, that this ends with me, I'm not passing this one on. That is one of the most powerful things that you can do. Deciding what your daughters, your nieces, the younger women watching you, will not inherit from you is just as much a part of your mark as anything else. The things that stop with you matter just as much as the things that you carry forward. And I want to leave you with this. You don't have to have all this figured out right now after listening to this episode. And you don't need a grand plan or a perfectly articulated answer to any of those 3 questions that I've asked you in this episode today. Just the fact that you're listening to this episode now still and asking yourself the questions and thinking about them at all says something about who you are already. The mark you leave isn't built in a single moment. It's built in all of the small ones. The way you showed up today, the choices that you made this week, the conversation you had or were brave enough to start, the thing you decided quietly would end with you. It's already happening. And if today's episode has actually stirred something in you and you're thinking, I really want to go deeper with this, I want support to do this work and to do it properly, then I want to tell you about Reimagine. It's my 6-week one-to-one mentoring program, and it's designed for exactly this moment. Over 6 weeks together, we work through who you are now, what you really want from this next chapter, and how to start building it with clarity and confidence. It covers everything from your values and what's really driving you, to the emotional stuff that gets in your way, to the mindset work, and to mapping out your future self and what that's going to look like. It's personal, it's incredibly supportive, and the women who come through it describe it as genuinely life-changing. Now, if that sounds what you need right now, head to the link in the show notes or just go to joclarkcoaching.com and you'll find all the details there. Now, I only work with a small number of women at any one time, and I'd love to work with you as well. I know that your life, just like the women who have gone through Reimagine, will be changed forever. And if this episode meant something to you, please share it. Leave a review, send me a message, let me know it landed. Hearing from you genuinely makes my day. Now, take care, and I'll see you back here next week. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, follow, and share it with another incredible midlife woman. And join me next week as we keep creating an amazing second half of life.